Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. And we are back. This time with a little bit of a classic review for you guys. Yes, this is something that we've spoken about a couple of times. I know I've spoken about it with our boy Alex and Evan on Beyond the Splatter Graves multiple times. Hush, the Mike Flanagan film that was shoved in a closet, pushed down into a grave, completely forgotten, taken off the internet. You cannot watch this from Netflix for reasons still relatively unknown. If you have answers, if you know what's going on, drop a comment. I'm really curious to see. But yeah, Hush, it's finally back in the hands of Mike Flanagan and co. They got the rights back, I think, like late last year. And we've just been kind of waiting and seeing what's going to happen who's going to pick this up. A lot of people said it's going to be Criterion. A lot of people were saying that Arrow was going to do a version, but I don't think anybody was shocked. I don't think anybody was surprised when it wound up going to the folks over at Shout and Scream Factory. Yes, they did a version of Hush, and man, the good folks over there, they said, hey guys, we like the content you're doing. We like what you're doing with all these movies talking about Mike Flanagan. Would you like a copy? And they sent us one. Luke has it in his possession at the moment. But yes, we both got to sit down, watch both versions, experience Hush again for the first time for me since 2016. I watched this with a bunch of friends in my friend's basement. This was like just out of high school, Dylan, like coming over late at night, smoking a little bit of the devil's lettuce and watching this. And I got to tell you, when I first saw it, when I first turned it on, I wasn't the biggest Mike Flanagan fan. I wasn't as engrossed in his stuff yet. And I was like, okay, we'll see what happens. I mean, it's cool. I thought it was a good little slasher. I was pretty much like, this was fun. This was unique. It was very, very cool what they did with very little. And I became a big fan of it.
And, this appearing on Netflix, I think around that time, I would say 2014, 15, and certainly 16, where there was a lot of just random films popping up on there. And I would just kind of peruse and give random films a chance. I remember giving Oculus prior to my viewing of Hush just a light watch. It wasn't something that I really sat down and gave the time of day. I think I just turned it on randomly at one point. So I found Hush, I think it was around that 2016 era there, and didn't really know, didn't have any expectation, just was going to turn it on and say, just another light watch for me. But it ended up really gripping me. It was something where I love the take on that slasher aspect, but they give it just enough of a twist to give it that unique feel that you could say, hey, Mike Flanagan has a voice in this film. I really like that take on it. So when it was announced that this was actually getting a physical release, I know certainly in our circles, this was one of the most anticipated releases because, hey, we were actually going to get to revisit this. I had watched Hush when it was available streaming a handful of times, but honestly, I have not revisited this probably for at least 4 years. So I was really excited when this came up and said, hey, we're going to be able to actually get a copy of this prior to its release and get a review because this in 4K, very different experience, I will say.
Absolutely. I was just talking with Luke right before we hit record about my experience with this. And mind you, it's a hazy experience a little bit there in two ways. But I remember this having some kind of like a glossy, almost Netflixy sheen that they were adding to a lot of their films back then. I know the Ridiculous Six was like, really, really up there. It was almost like they were turning up the sharpness on all of their releases for a while there. I think trying to kind of turn up that because I know they were really trying to get into the 4K game, but streaming 4K was still not as fluent as it was now. And so I think they were trying to kind of make up for that a little bit. And I just remember this movie looking very modern, but watching this new transfer, I have no idea if this was shot on film, but it looks like it was. It looks really crispy, really clean. The color grade on this is immaculate. And, there's two different versions. We'll dive into that a little bit, but even just the standard version, going back and revisiting the film in color, like, oh my God, like they really, if they went in and touched anything up, which I know they did, it looks so good. Like everything looks so nice with all those green and brown tones, with all the deeper blues and everything. It all is just so balanced. So when you see things like our killer, his mask, his white mask, it stands out so well and it makes it so much creepier. I love what they did with it.
Especially with the dynamic that they choose here. One of the things that really popped out at me when I turned this on was that dynamic of we have our main character there inside the house. It's got that warm tone to it. We talk about it like with the strangers and things where they're really able to capture that warm tone, feeling like you're at home, where she's inside the house and you get those visuals of, right behind her those dark windows, and it really does pop where you have this contrast there. And then when we get in the meat potatoes of the actual film itself, and we have this our slasher outside. I love those shots on this particular transfer here because you get that dynamic, that warm versus that dark blue, and that goes throughout the film until we're into complete darkness, and those blues epically pop on here. It just this transfer looks so beautiful on the screen that if there's ever a case to be made why physical media should still be around, I am always going to point to this Hush 4K here because this one, from a sound design perspective, from a visual perspective, this one knocks out of the park in every aspect for me.
And I will say I was very curious. So right after this, I nerded out a little bit with myself, and I had bought this on my Voodoo account when it first dropped because it came to PVOD first. So I bought it day one because I was like, man, I don't know when, because this we hadn't even had the Blu-ray announced yet, and I was just like, man, I want this. I just want to see it again. So I went back, and even that, even a digital transfer, it still looks really good. I mean, I got to say the 4K, as long as you calibrate your TV right and you have a good player. I used my PS5 with this one. I mean, it just absolutely soaked up everything. And I got to say, it was certainly one of the big surprises here because it's one of those things with like older films. Like I watch like They Live and Alligator and some of these more recent Scream Factory 4Ks that I've seen. And, like they look great. And it's always very impressive how they are able to really make those colors pop and those shine come back to them. But like with a modern film, I'm always a little bit like, it'll look okay, or a semi-modern film. Like, I don't know if it's going to be that big of a difference. This one certainly has something to it that they did to really make this puppy pop.
Yeah, and I was probably the most curious about this one because as I'm thinking about it, I can't really pinpoint any film that we've got this 4K transfer that has been primarily at night, and that's what I was very curious about to see how was it gonna feel authentic. Sometimes it just doesn't shine through the lens, I think, and I can't remember how I felt about it when I had watched when this was streaming on Netflix, but that was my big sticking point here of how was this going to look? And I'll say I turned off all the lights in the house and just watched this film illuminate from my screen, and I had such a fun time with it. It's one of those ones where you feel like you're along for the ride, especially when you watch this at night, which is highly recommended for
Oh
me
yeah.
because it really just adds to the authenticity of it. The transfer here is perfect. There are some scenes in here, especially when we're outside in the woods and things like that, where these things really do pop. Sometimes when it can kind of get lost, it kind of all meld together if it's not so distinguished. But this one, I'll say everything does pop in here, especially when we're going from inside the house to the outside of the house and everything in between. I think this one really does work. I think this one, if you're gonna make some room in your budget, Hush has got to be on that list right now because this one you're not going to be disappointed. The sound in this is so crisp, and of course, when we're dealing with the subject matter of Hush, it has to be absolutely crisp in here. And they did not skip on anything in this film from a sound perspective, from that visual aspect of it. This one from really works on every experience level, I think.
Yeah, and I was a very, very big fan of what they did with that concept of having the main character be deaf and kind of, using that as one of the catalysts for what sets this film apart from just a standard slasher. And again, I always forget just how brilliant it is that they set this whole thing up. Our buddy Evan did a wonderful breakdown analysis review of this film a few months ago. And it was one of those things where he even mentioned this, and I went back and watched his video just after watching this again to really soak up a lot of the stuff he was saying. And I agree with him wholeheartedly about how it's so awesome to see how intentional those first few, like probably 2-3 minutes of this film are, where you hear everything, but it's so heightened. It's almost that ASMR style of like listening to like things get cut, moved, shifted, breathing. It's all very intentional because it slowly fades away. And then we were in the, shoes of our lead actress here, Maddie, played by the wonderful Kate Siegel. And yeah, I think it's really well done. This is, in my mind, Flanagan's ode to Halloween. I think that's certainly what I took away from this viewing, especially with just how it was shot, how it was put together, because this film doesn't rely too heavily on gore. Like, it does have a couple of bloody scenes. There's some scenes that are definitely a bit more, gruesome, but like they're so sparse compared to some of the other slashers that we've spoken about recently. And I really appreciated that for this. It really leans back on just the tension and the playfulness of our killer when it comes to our victim, and just how scary this situation would be for anybody, but let alone somebody who is, lost one of our major senses. Like, it's a really, really smart concept, and it really works.
Such a unique way to approach a slasher, I think. We don't see that. Nothing that sticks out in my head that I've seen prior to that, and certainly not after. But the way that this film is approached from a sound perspective, but from just that story aspect of it, where, you're in this certain level of comfort at the beginning, and it's such a short time. We're not in Haddonfield for a very long time, feeling comforted to a certain extent, where this one, that trigger's pulled rather quickly, and we're already feeling tense. And I forgot how dark this film gets. There's a character in here that makes an appearance a little bit later on through a window. I don't want to say too much about it, with our killer. And my gosh, I had initially forgot about that scene. And then as it was ramping up, I was like, oh, yes, I forgot about that. So if you haven't seen this, I don't want to spoil that aspect of it, because it's absolutely dark, and they're not afraid to go into those dark places. Mike Flanagan does talk about that in the commentary, which I did have a chance to check out, which is rather fun. It's such a great experience to get into the mind of the creatives that worked on this, and really share some stories on how they were able to approach things, especially being a very smaller budgeted film, and them not having, they had to shoot this in sequence because they didn't have enough money for wear and tear on the costume. So they had to kind of just go one scene by next scene by next scene. And one of the funniest stories in this, me being a big cat person, is obviously we know that there's a cat in this film. And Mike Flanagan talks about having to shut down for an entire day of production because this was an indoor cat, and they decided to use it outdoors. And of course, the cat runs under the house, and they cannot
No.
get the cat out. And another fun little wraparound as we get to the end of it, and the cat makes an appearance again. If you look below the screen, Mike Flanagan points out, never noticed it, there's a fishing line tied to Kate and the cat, because they're worried that that cat is going to make a break for it. So if you really look in this transfer, you'll see it right at the bottom, just moving around. So there's so many fun tidbits of stories in here on how they were able to approach this film and really get this done. And of course, if you've ever tried to your hand at making a short film or a film in general, all those obstacles that go through here. So this one, you can really, you sense that love that they have for this film, and you can tell that they're glad to have this one back. And of course, they are absolutely having a great time doing a commentary for this one.
Yeah, I mean, they really have just stacked this release out with all kinds of new special features. I remember when this showed up this past week and did a video call with you. I know that was one of the things I pointed out on the back of that Blu-ray. If you look, Luke, everybody knows, if you've bought Scream Factory, Shout Factory, you are used to it. They always put how, like, what special features are new in that nice little thing there. And yeah, see, there you go. Every special feature on here is new because it's never had a release before. So it's awesome to see that. And I mean, we're talking about like at least 3 or 4 different commentaries on here. There's a whole bonus features discs with even more commentaries. But then there's also just tons of interviews with each individual piece and part to this film. Everybody from the Newton brothers, the composers, the directors of photography, Kate Siegel, everybody has a little piece here. And then they also talk about the black and white Shush Cut that was supervised and approved by Mike Flanagan. I mean, this thing is just stacked to the nines with new special features and things they were able to put in here. And I got to say, the Shush Cut, I know many people are looking forward to that. They're excited to see what it does. It's a very different experience. It adds a very different level of depth to this. I'm always, ever since Logan and Mad Max and stuff started doing like the Chrome cut and releasing like Logan Noir, people have kind of said like, oh, this is just a gimmick. They're just doing it. And it's like, well, I mean, for some films, sure, I wouldn't say either of those. But this is another one where I wouldn't say this is a gimmick at all. I think that it definitely adds a different level, different layer to the terror, and just makes this overall a very different film. And I believe Mike Flanagan had said it was his intention to originally release this film in black and white.
And that's where, like you said, some people can say it's a gimmick. I think for the story here, it absolutely works because it's such a kind of claustrophobic tale, I think, and it's really reminiscent of some older films, especially ones that aren't necessarily black and white, but those 70s, early 80s films. And I think you kind of get that feel for it as you're watching the film, that version of it. So I think it's great. You can tell that Mike Flanagan has a love for this, that he would want to have this new version out there on the actual Blu-ray itself so fans can experience that because he's a fan of the game just like we are, and he knows that people are interested in that. So I'm so excited for people to actually experience that because I went into watching the original and then you watch the Shush Cut, and like you said, it is a different experience. It really does add some different level of tension that I don't think anyone's really going to be prepared for. So I think if you're not already sold just being able to see the 4K of the version that we've gotten on Netflix that you've seen before, I think having that Shush Cut, having that extra audio commentary there, really deep diving into those ideas that Mike Flanagan had, the obstacles that they came through to be able to get this available to people. I think this version here is perfection. This is something where I don't know if this is going on sale at all, anytime soon, but this one is absolutely worth that price tag because you get so much here. There's, I think, 4 discs throughout this thing, and it's just an unbelievable release. There's just so much going on. I think if there's anything that I'm going to recommend for a physical purchase for 2024 into 2025, it's got to be Hush.
Yeah, and just so everybody knows, I'm pulling it up on the site now to remind everybody. This review is coming out the day before this drops, so you have mere hours to purchase this copy. But there is a first and foremost for $89.98, you will get the opportunity to pick up a signed version of the Hush collector's edition. You get one signed poster, an exclusive poster, and an alternative cover. They have one that's not signed. It's the same thing without the signature for $39.98, which is a pretty big step down. I know the signature is gonna kind of cost a lot, but again, it's Mike Flanagan's signature. In my mind, I hope that's not just like a reproduction signature. I would hope that no matter how many they get, they at least have Mike and his team signing it. That would make that price hike worth it for me. And then of course, if you're buying it from Shout Factory, you can get this puppy for $35.99. In my humble opinion, unless you want the signed one, I say spend the extra couple bucks, get the posters, get the alternative one. We got the standard copy sent to us from Shout Factory for free, so we're not going to complain about that at all. But if I had to be a chooser of someone who wanted to pick it out, I would say go for that because again, Shout Factory always knocks it out of the park with the posters and with the alternative slip covers. It's all money here at the end of the day. It works so well. And Luke can tell you, he's holding it right now. This is a beefy release. I mean, for it being 4 discs, like it feels good. It's thick. It's nice. It feels how physical media releases should feel. We talked about, the recent Texas Chainsaw release and how fun it is to have that gimmick, but it just felt like it was lacking in a few areas. I would be much happier with releases like this with some posters, because it's like you're still getting all of the content, you're still getting everything there in that package. Even if you just buy the standard edition, you feel like it's worth the extra, 10, $15 as opposed to a 19.99 Blu-ray like we used to get back in the day. So I say that this edition is totally worth picking up. I say that Hush is one of those films that I really was happy to come back and revisit. I know it's not a Thanksgiving movie, but maybe because we're getting closer to it, I just think like the slasher feel that we get here, the kind of claustrophobic feel, it
And that
felt
warm tone at
nice.
the start, I think,
Yes, yeah, it feels good to throw on around this time of year. I could definitely see the end of October, early November putting this on again.
Absolutely. This was such a fun watch. Like you said, I think this was just the right time of the year, just by chance here. This is a perfect release. I can easily seeing myself revisit this one. I don't know, around Thanksgiving. I don't know what it is. I'm there. I'm right there with you. I think this is just a perfect release for the time. So I'm so glad that we have this, that we can just access it anytime that we want, especially with those bonus features there. Just unbelievable stuff here. So, like I said already, if you're gonna make room in your budget for any physical release, I think Hush is at the top of the list right now.
Yeah, and I know we've been kind of picky with the couple of things that we have covered on here. We've given not too many. I think the last time we covered something and gave it like a must purchase was the Victor Crowley box set, the Hatchet one,
Beautiful
the
still.
Steelbook. It was still great, one of the best releases of the year. This is another one I'm gonna say must own. Absolutely, go pick it up day one if you can. Especially like I said, for that extra few dollars, you get those posters. And for the hardcore fans, go get that signed poster. I mean, this is one that I'm so happy to have in our collection. Luke has the copy. He's keeping that one since I got the chainsaw. And I will certainly be picking up my copy here shortly before this pre-orders end, so that way I can secure it and all will be right with the world. But yeah, I mean, I'm absolutely on board with it. Luke, I know you've said all the positive things, but is there anything else you want to throw in there about the Blu-ray? Any of your experiences since you've gotten to dive into a few more of the special features or anything?
It's always fun to just be able to sit down. We talk about the lack of commentaries on a lot of physical releases nowadays, where they're just bare bones releases, and being able to sit down and listen to Mike Flanagan talk about his process and what they went through, it gets you excited. If you're creative at heart, you just want to sit down and start thinking of things, ways you can approach stories that you've thought up in your head, or maybe even get stories that you didn't even know existed. Just listen to creatives talk, and I got to say, what a fun experience. Yes, the film is great. I knew what to expect going in terms of quality of the film. Visually, it looks beautiful. Knocked it out of the park there, but always excited to see the commentaries. There's so many on here. So if that's something that interests you, and us being horror fans, I know it will, you're gonna get your money's worth here. So you're getting a great film, you're getting a lot of great commentaries, and another version that you have not seen before. So this one, you gotta get it. You just gotta get it.
100%, folks. And yeah, that's going to wrap us up here for this review of Hush and the Hush 4K. Definitely let us know down below if this is one you're going to be picking up. I know many of you have already messaged us and have said through comments and other things when we're doing our lives that this is certainly something you're going to be buying. I'm excited for you to see it. It's certainly something that we're happy to have in our collection finally. And yeah, are there any other kind of lost to time gems in the horror space, not necessarily Mike Flanagan's work, but other gems that you want to see get a 4K? Because we're going to send this over to Shout and Scream Factory. And if they do watch this far, hey guys, pay attention, because I'm sure there's a few more that we'd like to see get restorations that I'm sure they're already hard at work trying to get the rights to. So, yeah, great time to be a horror fan, as it always is, guys. And yeah, thank you again. We just crossed 15,000 subscribers. I'm going to keep saying it, which is just an absolute insane milestone. And yeah, we got a lot of great content as we move into this week's Turkey Week. Lots of good food, good horror, and lots of fun stuff on the horizon. So keep your eyes peeled on the channel. We'll still be posting. And yeah, that's going to wrap it up here. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the horror shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. spell.